Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and today we're going to be taking a look at another two Raspberry Pi cases, this time from a company called Argon40. When I did my Raspberry Pi case roundup a couple weeks ago, I ended up looking at a whole bunch of different cases, some of the clamshell type designs, some of the stack and build type cases, and after I put that video out, a lot of people said, Chris, you got to check out these Argon40 cases if you liked the ones that you had in your video. So that's what I did. I purchased two of these, and already I can tell you that both of these are absolutely amazing in their own special ways. In fact, this one, the Argon Neo, has overtaken as my standard case now, right? So I want to show you guys why, because in that video, the Rainbow Pi case from Pi Moroni actually won the whole thing, but only because I liked the aesthetics of the Flirk case a little bit better, but this one has access to the GPIO pins. So what we're getting with the Neo is essentially the aesthetics of the Flirk, but with access to the GPIO, okay? So this case is just awesome, and I want to show you guys why in more detail. So let me bring the camera close so that I can show you the Argon40 Neo and the Argon40 One cases for the Raspberry Pi 4. All right, so here we have a look at these two cases. Now, the Argon Neo is $15, and the Argon One is $25. So we're going to start by taking a look at the Argon Neo. So I'm going to put the Argon One aside for now. And this, number one, it was a very, very easy installation. It took me less than 5 minutes to get the Raspberry Pi installed into the Argon Neo. This is passively cooled, so if we open it up here, you can see that there's very little room. It's pretty slender. There's very little room between the top aluminum portion of the case. I think it's aluminum. It's some sort of metal. And then the CPU and memory below it. What it does come with, however, is a thermal pad. So you put the thermal pad down. It covers both the CPU and the memory. And then this portion of the case, or rather the Raspberry Pi, then pushes up from the bottom into the metal portion of this case, which acts as heat dissipation. Now, I did some heat testing on this while it was running, and the heat right about this general area here, while the Raspberry Pi was at idle, was about somewhere between 95 to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I then ran a stress test for about 10 minutes and maxed out the CPU, and it jumped up to 115 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit in this little section right where the CPU is. So the heat dissipation in this case is phenomenal. I mean, it's great. It works perfectly. Now, this top portion of the case, you can see here, has a couple of magnets, and they're actually really strong magnets. It also has this little sort of latch in the back that connects to this portion of the case here. This thing is really, really well designed. So when you pop it on the top and slide it in, it holds tight, right? So this is not going to come off very easily, even though it is held on by a magnet, which is really, really nice. And then, of course, it looks beautiful when the top is on. I mean, this looks absolutely gorgeous. When you take the top off, you have not only access to the full GPIO, but they have sort of printed all of the GPIO pinout right here on the case, as well as DisplayPort, Pi camera port, and then up here you've got this Pi camera mount, although I have the official Raspberry Pi camera and it did not fit in this Pi camera mount. So I'm not sure exactly what one is supposed to go in there, but the official Raspberry Pi camera does not fit right here, which is fine though. I don't actually use that camera for anything anyway. So for my purposes, not a big deal. So there we go. This is the Argon Neo, and again, I love this case. For 15 bucks, this is absolutely going to be my number one go-to case for the Raspberry Pi 4. I will probably buy a couple more of these. This thing is just awesome. Let's now move on to the Argon One, because the Argon One has its own kind of special use case. Okay, so what looks different about the Argon One versus the Argon Neo? In fact, let me shut this thing down here. Okay, so we're shut down. I'm going to unplug everything out of the back. And what you're going to see here is that all of the components have been moved over to here. So the components that are typically on this side of the Raspberry Pi sits in here like this, right? So you can see this is a Raspberry Pi 3 that I have in here because I accidentally bought the Raspberry Pi 3 case instead of the Raspberry Pi 4 case. But they do make a Raspberry Pi 4 Neo case. So the Raspberry Pi 3 or 4 sits in here like this. They've got this little expansion board that pops on like so, and then moves the ports that are on the side over to the front of the case, which is really nice because now you can make this the front of the case and have all of your cables coming out the back of the ArgonOne, which is a really, really cool design, especially if you're going to use this thing as a desktop or a media center or just a, like a retro gaming console. It's just nice, like if this is up on a shelf, that all of the wires that are potentially going to be plugged into it all come out the back. Now, one other thing that you'll notice on the back here is there's a power button. Okay, so that's also part of the case, that it comes with this power button that is not just a power button for on and off, but there's actually a script that you can install that controls not only the power button, but the fan inside. So let's talk about the power button first. When you install the script for this case, this is the first case I've ever seen that comes with a script that you install onto Raspberry Pi when you put the Raspberry Pi in. The script controls what the power button does. So you press it once, it turns it on. If it's already on, a double tap of the power button will reboot the Raspberry Pi. If you hold it for 3 to 5 seconds, it'll do a graceful shutdown and power off. And if you hold it for more than 5 seconds, it forces the power off. So really cool functionality that you get sort of additionally with this power button. Also, if you just tap the power button while it's on, it's not going to turn off. Like, so if you accidentally bump it, you have to actually hold it down for 3 to 5 seconds to do a graceful shutdown. Inside this case, in fact, let's take a look here. There's also a magnetic portion of the case right here, which allows you access to the GPIO. And once again, they have sort of etched in all of the GPI pinout here so that you can see what each of these pins does. Again, really, really handy if you're using this for any sort of maker stuff or experimentation, or you want to attach a breadboard to the Raspberry Pi. Very, very convenient pinout right there. And again, this is once again magnetic, where it just pops on very, very nicely. You can either use it or you don't have to. Let me pop off the bottom so you guys can see underneath here. And here you can see the bottom of the Raspberry Pi. Again, this is the Raspberry Pi version 3, which has the larger HDMI connector. They also make a version of this case for the Raspberry Pi 4. So this is that sort of sideboard. It plugs in like that, and then the whole thing, pops into the bottom of the case very, very easily. It wasn't as easy a setup as the other Argon case, but again, there's more to this one, and so it wasn't that much harder though. It was actually pretty simple still. Now I'm going to take this whole section out so that you guys can see that a little bit closer. There we go. And here's where you can see the board. So we've got the 3.5-inch audio jack plugged in, as well as the HDMI. And then on the bottom, we have a fan. So there is a fan. This is actively cooled. There's also a thermal pad. So not only is it actively cooled, it's got this thermal pad that connects to the aluminum portion of the case. They built this board in here around this little aluminum riser that is part of the top of the case. So you put your thermal pad on, and then when you stick the Raspberry Pi back in, that thermal pad lines up with the CPU of the Raspberry Pi. So this case is passively and actively cooled. How cool is that? I mean, this thing is amazing. So especially if you're going to be using this as like a retro gaming console or a media center PC or something like that, then you're going to want this extra cooling in here, because if you're doing any sort of transcoding or playing media through the Raspberry Pi, you're going to be heavily using the CPU, and you want to make sure that it stays nice and cool. So again, your GPIO pins line up with this GPIO connector right here, and then that's basically how everything gets back together. All right, there you go. All back together, super easy installation. All right, there you have it, and props to Argon40 for some really, really well-designed cases. These are probably the best design cases that I personally have seen for the Raspberry Pi 4, and I'm absolutely in love with them. I'm super glad I found them. And thank you for everyone who pointed these out to me in the YouTube comments, because yeah, you were spot on. These things are awesome, and I'm glad I checked them out. There you go. The Argon Neo and the ArgonOne from Argon40. Links to everything down below in the description. Those are Amazon affiliate links. If you guys click on them, it doesn't change your price at all, but it does get a couple bucks for the channel for making this kind of Raspberry Pi content for you. And if you are interested in more Raspberry Pi content, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. I'm doing videos like this on a fairly regular basis. All right, that's it. My name's Chris with Crosstalk Solutions. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.